So today's video is going to be a little bit shorter because I'm already ready, but we're gonna leave like in a little while. So there is that. And I still have to have lunch. But I wanted to start by kind of like sharing a very funny story that happened yesterday. So I've been going to college, with via Uber, because usually it's my mom and I, both go, and like Uber is usually like the same price of $2 bus tickets. Like 2 bus tickets would be $12.50. Brazilian reais, and the Uber sometimes is a little bit less than that, sometimes a little bit more. It's like around 13, sometimes 14. So like it's, if you divide like that difference, 150, it's like 75 seconds more, and usually it's like much more comfortable, and it kind of like gets us right away there, at the place, because the thing about taking buses is that there is like a time. So we've been kind of like going via bus. Yesterday actually it was like $9.94 in our ticket, so it was considerably cheaper than going by bus. And that is kind of like the math that happens, like there's a compensation, and in the end it is kind of like about the same. But yeah, so yesterday we called an Uber, and we were kind of like waiting for it, and then a car pulled up like in a driveway around the same time that there was like a car behind that, but we thought it was the first one, so we went there, and like the driver started driving and took us there. And then like about a few minutes in, my dad calls me and is like, hey, you're in the wrong vehicle, like the one that was that had arrived after the one that we got into, like that was the right one. So there's we went to the same one in the end, like because this driver, he was going to kind of like be placed to kind of like get somebody else. So there's that. And also so that person canceled, and then our driver canceled. So like this man, he took us to college, and he did not charge us. We were trying to pay him, and he was like, nah, that's okay. He's new in the system, like that is pretty much what we kind of like. So it's interesting because like knowing that, I see the the warning sign. So for example, it ended up being the car is the same model as our car. So I was looking at like the panel, and I was like, okay, that does not look, because it was a Honda, like the vehicle that was supposed to, but like it didn't really click with me. I was just like, oh, that's weird, and I didn't think any further about that. But basically, we ended up going. I don't know, I just thought it was really funny. There was this one time that the car kind of like stopped by for my parents and I to take it, and we almost got in, but then it was like, oh, I'm not on Uber. It's kind of like scary because 3 people tried to get into the vehicle at the same time. But this time, like, we got into the vehicle, it started moving, and we were there. So there's that. Also positive news, I ended up selling 5 items in my online store. I have 2 stores. One that I sell stuff that is from my mom, that she gives me to kind of like sell at like a higher price, because those are higher, kind of like more expensive items of articles of clothing. And then there's mine, where I put my stuff. And so I had 5 items on my mom's store, and when we go out, like we're gonna drop it by, gonna pick up my grandma. Oh yeah, because we're going like downtown, because my grandma has some stuff with her taxes. I think that she paid double, so have to see kind of like how like she can get the money back or something like that. So we're going to this kind of like this like establishment that like you can go and pretty much like try to get anything solved that has to do with the government. So we're going there. So before this, I'm dropping like this package. I'm excited about it, and I'm hoping that I'll have like a similar sale, like I'll be able to sell on my store, because I ended up adding a lot of like mostly crop tops, because I've been wearing mostly dresses now. So and I'm not really, right now all of my bottoms, they don't fit me, so there's that. I'm kind of like in the process of losing weight. For example, today I was looking at myself in the mirror, and I was like, okay, I'm starting to see a change. And as I said, like it's going to be slow and steady. I'm kind of like ready to be patient, but until like they fit me again, like I'm not really wearing any of that. And also, like even when I go back to my original weight, like I do plan on kind of like continue to in this this vibe of me just wearing dresses and stuff. And I put up a lot of stuff for for sale. I have like more stuff to put up, so like I'm looking forward to kind of like, I don't know, somebody could just come in and just sit by and just find like lots of things that they like, and make a purchase. But this is the type of thing, like type of expectation that I try not to have, because historically it has just led to disappointment. So I'm not thinking too much. I'm like putting there. I'm doing also like this website slash app that I use. They started like, I don't know if they're using AI or something, but like right now, like they are, because like you add pictures, you add the description, the size, and everything. So that is, but like now they're adding the descriptions. So that just makes things easier for me. So I'm happy about that, because I never really knew what to put in the description. Usually I put on like the measurements, but like people really care about that. I mean, some people do. Like some people, they will ask you for your for the measurements to kind of like see if like they fit. But yeah, so it's kind of like even easier to kind of like upload things right now. So that's pretty much what I'm trying to say. Also, on the topic of AI, I wanted to clarify, because I talked about it yesterday and I don't think I made my stance clear. I'm mostly against AI. Like I think that the potential is there and it could be something that is very helpful, but the way that is happening right now, like there's so many issues, and there's like I'm not gonna talk too much about it, because I've talked about this extensively in real life, so like I don't want to talk about it again. I think everybody kind of like knows my stance. But I did mention yesterday that it was kind of like surprisingly good to help me study. It's kind of like I was having a conversation with somebody, and that's the whole thing of like teaching is one of the best ways to learn. To really make sure that you kind of like that you're really imprinting knowledge into your head. So that is kind of like something that I kind of like noticed, that like I'm having like a conversation, and it helps me, because like it naturally, like like it is not 100% accurate, like there's always room for mistakes, but that is a good thing, because it helps me kind of like catch those. But yeah, so like it's pretty much what I meant yesterday when I was like using it. That I was like using it to study, kind of like having it back and forth, and it kind of like helped me summarize the ideas. Because the thing about my classes so far is that I really try, like there is a type of class, for example, when I was in high school, I really enjoyed learning. I really enjoyed the classes that we had to kind of like sit there and and listen to our teachers kind of like talking about things. And I know that this is not the reality for everybody. I know a lot of people don't really learn that way, but this has always been kind of like the case for me, that I really enjoyed like that kind of like the passing of knowledge. It was something that I was very invested in, so that was kind of like good. And I found that like my classes, the ones that I've been having so far, they are really good, in the sense that I'm really engaged with what's being said. However, that is not enough. Like I need this kind of like back and forth, so I can really fixate that word, like the knowledge in my brain. And that's pretty much where I said that, like, yeah, it has been helpful, like I've been learning. So as I said, like, I think there's a lot of potential, but like that's the issue, that a lot of like the things, the functionalities that people want to offer you, they're not really working right now. That's just like this promise that they are going to work in a few years, but like I kind of like, let me just get that in a few years. But like if you don't invest right now, like there's not going to happen. So it's this interesting cycle. But yeah, also something kind of funny almost happened yesterday, because like last week, like the same class I had Tuesday, I kind of like ended up like leaving, and then today yesterday when I went to class and my professor started talking, I was kind of like, oh my god, I think, because the classes started like ended very early, because the classes are from like 7:30 to 10:30, no, from 7 p.m. to 10:30, and then there is like a little recess halfway through there. I think like the official time is like from 7:40 to 7:50, but usually like like the teachers, the professors, they let it extend a little bit more. So sometimes we have like 15 to 20 minutes of recess. Also, like the classes, they so far have not really passed like 10 p.m. They usually like that is the time at the end, but like this teacher, like this professor, oi, So I'm gonna end this video right here. It's just that I have to send an audio to a friend. She has a consultation today and she's not really willing. She doesn't really want to go. So my mom asked me to send this audio, so I can kind of like tell her how like stable I am, how like everything is working out fine. And also I have to send an audio to my doctor. I'm kind of like sending her an update like every week. So today is the day that I've been updating her. So I have to also record that and send it. But just kind of like conclude the story that I was telling. So I thought that like this at the beginning of this class, yesterday, that I kind of like I had left halfway through it, because as I said, like her classes ended up like 8:50, 9 p.m. and I think like it's always kind of like, oh my god, no, like we're going to the recess, and I lost it. I missed like the mark, and I just left early. But then like yesterday she also kind of like sent us home early, so I was like, okay, I didn't really miss anything. But I did have a moment there. I was like, oh my god, that's kind of funny, like I just skipped class unintentionally. But I don't know if like classes are going to keep like being this, because yesterday and like the week before, I think it was kind of like the introduction to this class. So I think I kind of like ended up ending earlier, but I think starting like next week, like it's probably going to be longer. But my mom was raising an interesting point, because I have been to 5 different colleges so far. So the first 2, they were private, like I had to pay tuition and all of that, and kind of like usually like college, compared to high school, for example, like the classes, they end up earlier, and they kind of like, I know they don't, because that's the thing, like I am right now, like the last 3 institutions I was a part of, like they're all like the first one was like a federal one, second one was a state one, and this one that I'm right now is also federal. So like the previous 2 that I had, like the classes, they kind of like follow closely, for the most part, like the school, the kind of like the timetable from like that high school, for example, high school, middle school, they have. But like this college I am at right now, like classes, they start kind of like a month later than the other ones. Then the break, in the middle of the year, I think it starts like 2 weeks earlier, and in the end, I think it ends up like around the same time, which is like the end of November, beginning of December. Although I will say that so far in all of the colleges I've attended, all these 5 institutions, usually by the time like you get to like the end of November, it's already like everything's wrapped up, like we have already taken all the exams and all that, which is something that it differs from high school, because at least like I've always been like a very I think I mentioned this before, I was like a straight A student. I was like pretty much doing everything according to the norms and all that. So I went up to the last day. I think high school was slightly different, because they were pretty much like, you don't have to come like this day. So I didn't. When I was like in elementary school, middle school, I really wanted to go to school every day and attend every single class. And when I didn't, I felt bad. Like I felt like, oh, I'm missing. There was this FOMO, actually, which was kind of like a mix of me feeling kind of like not left out necessarily, but feeling like I didn't learn as much as I could have. Like I wasn't there to learn, and that could impact also my grades. So there was that. But yeah, so far so good. So like basically my mom told me to tell my psychiatrist, like what I've been telling her, which is that everything is kind of like corroborating, everything is working out great in my life. I don't know where this is coming from, and a part of me is a little scared that like things are going to change, that I'm going to kind of like, I know that things are going to go bad at a certain point. But like so far so good. Like every single area of my life is working out. I don't think I've ever experienced this before in my life. As I said, professionally, academically, regarding my hobbies, regarding my writing, regarding my health, like, and because the things sometimes like they're not ideal yet. My online sales, so things sometimes they're not really ideal, but they kind of like are getting around. I have like a solution to, for example, like my weight. Like I'm not there yet, but I am making an effort, and I am reaching out. I'm kind of like I have solutions. Like I'm improving. So that's it. I'm gonna wrap this up, and I might come back later to kind of like finish, because I didn't really kind of like share the thoughts I've been having, because I've been having a lot of thoughts, a lot of like realizations, a lot of like musings, and I'm gonna come back later. So